Your Mind presents a conversation with Dr. Phil Valentine.
Dr. Phil Valentine, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
So break it down for me. Who is Dr. Phil Valentine?
Oh, goodness gracious. You really want to be that bored?
Well, I mean, make it interesting, for crying out loud. We're trying to free our minds here, not bore our minds.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, we could be bored to death, or we can actually come back to life.
All right, give me the juicy stuff. I want to know what's mind expanding. I want to know what really matters.
Well, I could tell you I have been at this for the last nearly 40 years in naturopathic health. I'm a doctor of naturopathic medicine, classical naturopathy, not the naturopathy that has been superseded and subsumed by the medical association. I am also a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm a doctor of hygienic science as well, doctor of metaphysics. I have the distinction also of having been made an ambassador to what we call the ad hoc, actually not the ad hoc, but the du jour World Court. And I'm also a secured party creditor, 501c4 secured party creditor. I'm what my old mentor, Dr. John Henry Clark, called me a polymath. I didn't know what the heck that meant.
Yeah, what's that mean?
It means that I know a little about a lot of things.
Oh, yeah. So, my grandfather used to say that. He said, I might not be an expert on any one given thing, but I sure as hell know a little bit about a lot.
Yeah, and you grow old enough, you get to know a lot of things. And I kind of, because of the fact that I had a diverse look at the world and reality, I sought out diverse ways of approaching my perceptions to that. And in doing so, based upon my rigid Catholic upbringing and education, my mother and my father having me read 2 to 3 pages of the dictionary each night, and that dictionary was as big as me at that time, I was being honed in order to be a communicator. So from being an artist to a musician, and coming right back, I guess, to what my calling was, or what I was chosen by fate, or whatever you want to call it, to do. And here I am. I've been actually out there pounding the ears or the eardrums of people who would deign to listen to what I had to say, right. Being as coarse and as crass as I could to get those people who needed to hear it, whose language needed to hear it, to show them that I was not a, stuck in the mud or stick up to you-know-what professor who's trying to use big words to impress them. I just came down to the street and started talking to the street, and then from there bring them up to a level so they understand the scholarship and what went into imparting this kind of information.
Just because somebody can use big words doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to articulate their ideas and get them across in a proficient manner. And that's something I value about the work you do, is that you're able to put it in a blunt, concise fashion. Dr. Phil, I just called you Dr. Phil. That's not good. Uh-oh. All right, I'm just going to call you Phil. We'll drop the DR just for the sake of not getting it confused with any TV clown.
Phil.
Phil.
They call me Sanu.
Sanu.
They call me doctor. Yeah, but Sanu means doctor itself also. Sanu in the ancient Kemetic language.
Okay. I like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. So one of the themes we tend to tackle here, and with the Free Your Mind Conference network, if you will, is good over evil. And a big part of that is identifying the evil in today's world, and then, of course, focusing on methods to overcome this evil. I know that sounds like it's a simplistic paradigm I'm setting up here, but to a certain extent, it's a good launching off point for our discussion today. Through your in-depth research of both the metaphysical world and the physical world, can you, to me, and our audience describe to us the nature of the beast, and then we'll shift in the course of this conversation, of course, to the solutions, to the appropriate methods in which we deal with this crazy world.
Well, in our school, the University of Commission Sciences, we teach metaphysics or chemetaphysics from a perspective of how words are used to weave and to manipulate perception. And we are currently victims, or we have been essentially become a type of humanity hypnotized by what I call the spell, S-P-E-L-L. And of course, you know, based upon all your science fiction and all of your Grimm's fairy tales, witches and so forth, cast spells. Most people don't understand what that means.
Interesting. Well, you know, Phil, right off the back, I always hated spelling in school. I wonder if there's a connection there.
Indeed. At times we understand words and phrases and spells, and they want you to spell correctly. That's why they have the spelling bee. They want you to make sure that in these words that you're using, that you are weaving perception. The word itself is to trigger what you have as an indoctrinated memory pattern that was created at at the time you were going to school and the time you were being conditioned and indoctrinated in school. So what the weavers of perception do is they weave a perceptual matrix into which you are seeded, and you call that your environment, your community, the day-to-day society, and so forth. And in that society, you are using words to reinforce what that society, or those who are the conditioners and the social engineers, they use words and specific ways for you to enter and understand words, so that by your behavior and your perception, you thresh out the kind of society that they have created or they have essentially designed. So when you want to talk about evil, what you have to look at is how the evil is set as a pattern of language, as well as that part of you that reacts to the language through your emotions, through the way that your intellect uses those words in order to weave a reality around you, your family, your friends, the community, and so forth. So what we are in is in a tapestry, a very well-woven tapestry, where you have now learned or were conditioned to describe your reality, not define it, but just to describe your reality. So everything is about surfaces. You have been taught to describe surfaces. You have not been taught to define the essences of what it is that you have been only conditioned to describe. So the evil is not knowing or being prevented from understanding how the essence of a thing operates, how the essence of nature, how the essence of man, how the essence of any and everything around us works. So what you're looking at, the surface, the black man looking at the white man looking at the black, the way we look at each other's religion and everything is based upon a surface description, based upon the words we are given, and not the essence of the thing being expressed. So what we are looking at, the evil we're looking at this time, is that the description of our reality today does not have any substance to it. And the descriptive reality that we have been functioning on has been only acting upon the reactive mind. So the mind is simply reacting to the description. The heart and the soul, being left out of that experience, is not allowed to experience the essence of the thing. So therefore, we are incomplete entities.
I see.
And that's the evil.
Now, this is a form of mind control, is it not? To dictate a certain language or linguistic use that is superficial and is being just that dictated to you. That, to me, appears as a form of mind control.
You were heading right on the head. It is mind control. It is actually behavioral control. It is behavioral conditioning, because the mind essentially is a thing that can once be known as the observer. See, most of us, I can't give you the complete layout of how we allow people to investigate and to analyze themselves. This is what our school allows them to do, to go through a self-analysis. The entire course is about self-analysis as it is expressed in the world outside of you, because as Krishnamurti said, you are the world and the world is you. But most of us don't know who we are. We only are reacting to what the world is, thinking that we are a victim of that world, not realizing that we're participating in it as well as a creator of that. So what we are doing now and what we are not seeing is that the mind itself is a operative energy. It's the fuel. It is the soil in which we are using the energy of that soil, the energy of the rays of that sunlight, the light. It's an energy pattern that then forms or is allowed to use our thoughts as a way to specialize our reality. Thoughts are nothing more than containers. They are not what we are. They are what we have been conditioned to be. Our thoughts have been colonized. And as you're saying, mind control. It's not mind control. It is thought manipulation so that the mind is following what the thought is, because most of the people don't know that the observer is the only thing participating in mind and thought. So now we think we are our thoughts. But if you're sitting in one place and you're listening to me at this time, and you're thinking about something, what is it that is actually perceiving and looking at the thought that you're thinking? Because if you are the thought, you can't know that that is a thought. But if you are not your thoughts, then you are actually looking at the thoughts that are in your head from something or some part of you that is not your thoughts. And that's the part that we teach people to come into the realization of and to embrace. Because then we find out that thought is nothing more than an instrument of the past. It is a collection. It is a container of past experiences. So all we do is go into a file of experiences and we look at the ones that we want to participate in and we pull it out of the file and then we focus our attention on that. But then what happens? Those who know that thought is our containers, they get us early. They look to us very early. They get into the imagination of children and they colonize that field of imagination with all kinds of Pokemon and toys and superheroes. And that child does not really get the chance to use that field of imagination to do self-examination. The child begins to project itself into the images that have been planted there.
Now you're speaking to a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I have a 3-year-old, and bringing him into this world, it was of great concern to us that there are tons of mnemonic mind control devices, if you will, tools of the manipulators in media and so on and so forth, that he, even if we choose not to expose him to, no matter what we do, we can't keep him in a bubble, man. It's crazy. I wish we could keep him in a bubble. But he comes to me with these things, and I said, where did you learn that? We don't send him to school. We don't send him in an environment, or to an environment, rather, that has all of these different programs, and they call it program for a reason, right? And we choose not to, but nonetheless, I guess the question that I'm getting at here is, how do we protect our youth to preserve their consciousness so that it's not manipulated by these exterior influences?
Well, you can't filter out everything. What our intentions are to create schools that for the very first 7 years of a child's life, it has no, or he or she has no experience with the technological world. You see, the brain is a 3-dimensional processor. It processes 3-dimensionality, 4-dimensionalities, 5th-dimensionalities. These dimensions are lost in 2-dimensional realities that are set up as virtual realities in our world.
So screens, computer screens, television screens.
Exactly.
smartphone screens. And I got to tell you, I've had a very hard time with this because part of what I do is centered around a screen. For better or for worse, I came into my activism and my research utilizing these tools that I just happened to be born at a time when these things were at my leisure to use. And as a result, he sees Daddy using these things. He sees Daddy communicating using these devices. And it's very hard to say, well, Daddy can do this, but you can't do this. You can't look at these screens and so on and so forth. So I have a hard time, even though I understand the virtue in omitting technology from his very new consciousness, if you will, or at least new in this physical body. I have a very hard time in actuality, and I'll be honest, my wife gets on me for this, actually limiting him to no screens whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. In your case, I can't give you what I gave or what I received as a child. As a child, I was raised in the bush, so to speak, in the southern part of Trinidad, where my people are coming from, in Trinidad itself. I was raised on sand and grass and trees and so forth. I was raised where you can pick your fruits. What I know for a fact is that in your circumstance, you can balance a situation. A child's mind and thought process is malleable at that age. They can adapt to anything you put them into as long as the learning experience is there. The one thing that is missing from the ability for the child to develop both sides of his or her brain is the contact, the three-dimensionality of the contact that the child has with the real world.
Well, we live in the country, and we try to do those things. You know, I take him into nature. We have chickens. We have fruit trees in our yard. We live that kind of lifestyle. And I hope that speaks to limiting some of the downsides of this other world that we are forced to live in at this point.
It is. Trust me. The three-dimensionality of his experience is what's missing from children who come from urban areas, where they go from a school, where they come from a home that's nothing. The world comes to them through a screen or through the worlds of the streets and so forth. Then they go into a cardboard classroom where all they have are two-dimensional pictures that reference the world. It doesn't give them a first-hand tactile experience of that world.
The experience, yes.
Indeed. And what's wrong, here's what the evil is. The evil is that those who are in charge of putting the education system, what I call the deducation system, together, know that the development of the brain is such that as a holographic matrix, that the three-dimensionality of experience is what allows for the energy patterns of the brain to become more centered and less centered and more, three-dimensional, more 360. It takes in more of the brain when all of the senses are being addressed, not just the sight. Because you could look at a plate of steaming food, or you could look at an apple on a two-dimensional screen, but you do not have the experience of that meal. You don't have the experience of that apple or the tree on which it's taken from. That robs you or the child of a developmental pattern that would have happened from that first-hand experience. Our children are being raised on second-hand experiences, which does not allow for empathetic development of the world. Okay? So when you don't have empathetic development, then there is no actual incontactness with one another. Lack of empathetic development between living things and living beings causes us to become as cold as we are today. We could look at murder the way that they project it on the screen in wholesale degrees without the empathetic connection to what a murder really is about. We don't know what that is only from what that two-dimensional reality tells us it is, because it isolates our first-hand tactile experience to it. And that causes a lack of development, therein lying a part of the evil that is maintained, that we have become a supportive entity of. So I see what you're saying as far as your child, because it was one of my situations that I had a problem with. That's why I took my son and my daughter everywhere I could so that they could touch at the petting zoo, so they could touch all the animals. You said you had chickens. I was raised around chickens. I was raised around mules and horses and things of that nature. And that's what's missing. That's what gave me a wholeness that I know was necessary for me to be able to impart the diversity. I knew what was missing, in other words. I knew what was missing in our present day reality and what they are trying to palm off as the ideal existence in Western society.
Even growing up in the concrete jungle myself, I longed for these experiences, and I intuitively felt an innate desire to get out there and experience nature and get beyond the concrete materialistic world that I was trapped in growing up in the urban setting of South Florida. So I think on some level we know this intuitively. We have this desire to experience and not just vicariously experience through programming. Right? There we go again. If we're being given these experiences in a two-dimensional manner, it's tricking the brain into thinking a certain experience, which oftentimes is contrived and imposed and is in no way, shape, or form a virtuous experience. It's filled with subliminals and all sorts of other intense mind control techniques.
In other words, you can project a three-dimensional image onto the brain and trick the brain into believing it's having a three-dimensional experience.
And unjustly, of course, and to what end is the question, right? So if we can utilize this sort of projection, if you will, of imagery, of thought, of programming, whatever you want to use as far as describing these forms of information sharing. If we can use this for good, we could also equally use it for bad. And in other words, the possibilities are there to use this to benefit a certain aberrant group or a certain influence that they want to push onto us. So let's look at some of those cultural agendas, if you will, that are being used to, whether it's keep certain people into certain groups, into certain categories, if it's race-based, if it's the sexual nature of these programs, getting people to seek certain unnatural homosexual agendas and so on and so forth. I mean, we see it in so many different forms of media today. We know that in hip-hop, for instance, much of it was co-opted at one point to push a criminal message and to further lead to the, prison industrial complex being fulfilled and so on and so forth. What are some examples in culture of these manipulations in your mind?
Well, you've pretty much touched on the foundation of what we are functioning under today. The hip hop, of course, we already know has been co-opted. So many of what they call founding fathers and mothers have told that story, and they're doing it brilliantly. And of course, I support everything that they're doing. As an elder, I support everything that they're doing to teach what has happened in that, I would say, colonization process. There are people who were in power over the last 500 years, or 600, 700 years, under what the Pope and the Vatican, the Popery or the papal throne of the Vatican had ruled, and it was called the St. Peter's Trust, 501c3, that the entire planet ran under, based upon conquest from the Vatican outward through England, Europe, Spain, and France. and what in Belgium and Germany and all that spread throughout the world under the aegis of the Vatican. And there was a deliberate distortion of the planetary visual as well as consciousness paradigm, so that those who were in charge, who kept the original archetypal blueprint, not only of humanity but of the planet itself, made sure that, knowing that the human mind is a creating or a processor of creational energies, that if they could condition the mind by changing words, changing imageries, and so forth, they can get the people themselves to reinforce their own consciousness prism. And that's what they've done for the last 700 or 800 years. It's changing now. And because we've become more and more intelligent, or at least the consciousness of the planet is raising, the mind prisms, we call it, the use of white light, and of course, white light breaks down into 7 different bands, that becomes itself a prism, because you can manipulate all 7 of those colors to give you a illusory or a functional reality that your brain will support, because that's all you are able to see. The use of light today is the secret to maintaining the lockdown. The more sophisticated you become in the knowledge of yourself, the more sophisticated their technology must become in order to circumvent what you would find out to free yourself with. So people like what you're doing and what others are doing to free people's minds are actually using light, first as thought, and teaching people how to see, not just to look at, but what to see through the illusion of light that is being so brilliantly used today, but so evilly, with so much evil intent, being used today to manipulate the minds of people. And what kind of signals and energies are being used in those very clear, crystal, ultra clear pictures in order to broadcast images down into your mind that you, because your mind looking at a television screen, completely accepts what's on that screen without even filtering that. The brain does not know how to filter what's coming across that screen. It takes everything in and then becomes a broadcast. What is there in your brain becomes the broadcast medium for your lockdown, for what you believe and perceive to be reality. So what you are, just to bring everything back around to how we say they have manipulated us through the education system, through the entertainment system, through the church system, we have at this time a cycle of illumination that is hitting this planet. The young people today are not going for the old order of the world, and the new world order is no longer in power. Trust me. The new order of the world is enlightenment. The new order of the world is love. And most people don't see it yet because, as with any other healing process, there must first be a revelation or a raising to the surface of the filth of the disease itself. And the raising to the surface of the disease is all of what you're going to be seeing today. The ISIS, the ISIL, the bombings, the madness that you see, the nuclear bomb that they may set off sometime, anytime in the next month or two someplace on this planet to make you believe that somehow you are being threatened. This is the last-ditch efforts of those who have been keeping us in that lockdown. Trust me, it's their last-ditch effort. And in that desperation, they're going to reveal themselves. And then the rest of the world will know that they have been inside of this illusory state and have been supporting it for so long, through religion, through education, through entertainment, through everything that they've been doing in their lives in this society.
Who are we? Why are we here? What is the nature of our consciousness and our reality?
Yeah, who are we? It's actually what we are.
What are we?
Yeah, that's the thing. Let's just address who we are and what we are. In our school, we teach that who we are what we've been conditioned to believe we are. So what we are is more important. We are spark. We are soul. We are divine sparks. We are part of a whole, a oneness that has differentiated itself into trillions of parts so that it may know itself. Every time that I know myself, every time that I am examining myself, I am the creative mind. I am participating in a mind, a overmind, a universal mind, a cosmic mind that is examining itself. And that part of my participation, as I rise in self-consciousness of what I truly am, not what I've been conditioned to be, but as I rise and become more aware of the wholeness of all of us as one thing, being diverse or diversified into so many different aspects of the one, then I begin to see the commonality of our experiences rather than the differences. We've been taught the differences over the commonality of our experiences. So that is what we are. What we are agents, mind agents for the all, as it seeks to know itself. In our school, we teach that the all cannot know itself. In other words, God is as ignorant of itself being what it is. And it knows itself only through its participation with itself. And its participation with itself is us. There was no sludge in the ocean that crawled up on land, took on legs, and decided to be a monkey. And then the monkey said, hey, listen, I'm tired of this coat. I'm going shopping for a new one. It's nonsense. Man always was. Man always will be. Man, there is no beginning to man, and there is no ending to what we know as the cosmic equation called man. There is no beginning to it. There is no ending to it. There is only the process of it, becoming or non-becoming. It steps in and out of the experiential realms so that that which it represents knows itself.
And when you talk about man, are you referring both to terrestrial man or extraterrestrial man as well?
I'm exploring that particular phrase, and I'm taking the Kabbalistic look at the name, the Mem Alf Nun. If you look at man, M-A-N, you deal with the Kabbalistic letters, it's Mem Alf Nun, which is mother, the father in the center, and that which continues or proceeds from both. So I'm speaking about the equation of consciousness, or that part of consciousness that is in search or in recognition of itself as a higher entity, as one that has the ability to reason and to know itself, to look at itself in a reflection and say, that is what I am, or, let me investigate what I see in the mirror. What is that thing that makes me want to know more about everything else? What is there about me that wants to observe and to know and to learn? That part, that thing in these different islands of consciousness that man exists on, there are different levels, different dimensional levels of that awareness, and that supersedes all boundaries. There are no boundaries to what man is on any level, no matter where that man exists in the universe or in what we call creation.
Okay. Is this your work here, Phil Valentine, Black People Have Extraterrestrial DNA?
No, I don't name those things. I tell you what, they take pieces of my lectures, and those who don't want to deal with the actual names take the themes, because I cover so much in my lectures. They take pieces of my lectures and they name them so that they could sell them. Maybe 10 of my lectures can make 100 videos so that they can make money on it. They just fractionate most of them. You'll know what my videos are, because my videos are very, very, the names are very long and involved. For instance, I had one called, the last one I did was on the Obama situation, but I called it The Asymmetric Algorithms of Psychopolitical Warfare. Okay, so you know that that's a Valentine name, okay, and that it's the true name. Because, and if you start seeing, did black have extraterrestrial? That's not me. My thing is not so prosaic, so sophomoric. My titles, I know when somebody is being integrous with my titles.
Okay.
Because I do it purposely.
But I am curious, title aside here, what is the nature of DNA? It seems like you have an interesting perspective.
The DNA itself is simply the template that founds us, or it's almost as if, just like the cell towers, it's just there to make sure that the soul has triangulated around, or the substance that the soul is creating around itself in the body matches the soul's intention. So the DNA essentially is the foundational intention of that particular soul. And if the soul is carrying a particular signature that is based upon its material experiences, then the RNA will have expressed that. So the DNA is the foundation. The RNA is the expression of what the soul and what the DNA lineage of that particular entity is. So the DNA and the RNA are like different components to a receiver. It essentially gives you the broadcast mechanism, but then they have to have the tubes and they have to have the wiring necessary to pick up the signals. The DNA translates the signals based upon how proteins are created from what we take in from the sunlight, from water, from what we eat of natural whole foods. And the materials that we make our proteins from, they get themselves dotted along, or they fix themselves in accordance with the mindset along the DNA tract, and how our thoughts think, whether we think from a higher degree of consciousness or a lower, more animal-based degree, dictates how the broadcast signal from the DNA then begins to create the RNA that then carries out the purpose that the intention was meant to express.
Interesting. Trying to wrap my head around all that.
Well, I mean, if you want to get deeper into it, we can go a little bit further in, and it's just like receivers, receptors, and broadcasters. We think about that only from what we see on the outside and what we pick up through our cell phones and so forth. Why do you think they call it cell phones? It's the same thing. The DNA is essentially broadcasting that as a tower. And what you get as the signal and the information would be what the RNA now expresses as thought or energies. So we are essentially, broadcast and receivers.
Interesting.
Biologically.
One of the things that just came to mind when you mentioned cell phones was the technology behind the cell phone. And I read, and I'm fascinated by fractals. Okay, fractals have always been such an interesting, thing to me. And you look at fractals in nature, and how there are patterns within patterns, and so on and so forth. And that fractal geometry has been used to create technology. For example, a cell phone. They've utilized certain fractal geometry principles to be able to create the antennas in these cell phones. And it just occurred to me that same fractal phenomena is something that could fit into what we were just discussing.
Well, they now have fractal audio systems. They now have fractal, dynamics, where they've taken geometric patterns, and hologram essentially, and what we live in is a fractal of a larger hologram. And all of us are participating fractals within that fractal of the mind of the Creator. All creation is a fractal of the Creator mind. So if we see fractals, or what they call fractals, we see energy expressions that take patterns around specific levels of intent of space-time. Now, what is space-time? Space-time is simply a medium into which the mind, or the creator mind, universal mind, cosmic mind, your mind, projects an intention. And thereby, the space-time is the coagulant for the intention. Okay? Space is the medium, which is the masculine energy, if you want to use it as such. Time is the feminine energy. Time is the coagulant. Without time, there is no creation. Therefore, time is an element. And most people who are not understanding and overstanding the principle of time look at time as something that's on the watch. They look at time as a fractal, essentially that time is the fractalizing of a continuum based upon how our perception is quadrant into beats per minute, per second, and so forth. Your heart, essentially, is maintaining the perception that the fractal is a whole, for example. Your heartbeat is actually giving you the space-time reference for your fractal experience. Now, space itself is simply the medium. It's a conditioned fullness. Let's just call it a conditioned fullness. There is nowhere in space that the mind of the Creator is not. It is only your limited perception to know what is in that space and what is the ability of space, what they call zero time or zero reference energies. It is something that because of our limited perception, we don't see that space is a conditioned fullness of universal mind. Time is an element introduced into that particular medium in order for reality and creation to come about. Without time, there is no coagulating of intent. There is no bringing together of what the intention was meant to express without the fractionizing of the continuum that we call the one. So, time itself, as a reality, is as an element, fire, air, water, and earth. Fire, air, water, and earth, time. Without time, fire, air, water, and earth, or the WORD of God, time, without that element affixing air, fire, water, and earth, these elements that are conscious as themselves would not be able to become conscious of themselves. So fire, air, water, and earth, which is the WORD, cannot become conscious of themselves because they're conscious as themselves. Fire is only conscious as itself. It does not know what it is to be conscious as water because water eliminates the ability for fire to know what it is as water or in its connection to water. The only place that these four elements come together to know themselves within the space of time is in the human mind and body. So the fire, air, water, and earth, which are the WORD made flesh, these elements know each other in the exercise of perception and consciousness that we call man. And it is time that allows for that coagulating process so that the intention of the Creator to know itself may know itself within that instrument called man.
How the hell did you put these dots together, man? Jeez.
Well, I don't know. You got to smoke enough reefer, you know, and
enough of that ganja, man. You had enough psychedelic, mind-expanding
peyote.
experiences.
Oh man, peyote! Back in the days when I was sitting with the shamans. Are you kidding?
Well, we joke to a certain degree, but we do know that there are certain benefits to entheogenic research and the use of these substances. But at some point, we get beyond that and we start to put these dots together. In this consciousness.
Indeed. This is not something that is unique to just me. This is not something that is unique to you. It is unique to all of us. It is something that we have all inherited. We all have the ability to process the Creator's mind so that it may know itself. We all have that ability. It is not something that is bestowed by somebody, God coming down, an angel. No. It is awakened. It is not bestowed. It is awakened within each of us. And we all have that potential.
Phil, thanks for coming on the show today, man.
It's been my pleasure.